stuff. Right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. For those of you who are able to write on the whiteboard, just please don't write because you're making lines. So just be careful where you put your pencil. We had stopped at, in fiqh, al-buyu' al-manhi or al-buyu' al-fasida. Basically, there's certain transactions which are prohibited, and we took quite a few of them. And inshallah, today we'll finish off with prohibited transactions, as well as we'll take what's called iqala. That's with regards to fiqh, buying and selling. And after that, we're going to go to the hadith in Bulughul Maram. So after telling you that certain transactions are prohibited in Islam, they then go to tell you that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade certain transactions, and they mention an-najash. So whoever's been making notes, the next after this, I think it's number 6, is called an-najash. Alif, lam, noon, jim, and sheen. In the hadith, he says, "Wala tanajashu." Basically, there's a few meanings when it comes to najash. One of them is to praise a product just so the perceived value of it goes up without the intention to buy. So I give an example. Let's say that I'm in a shop and I'm the shopkeeper, and you come and you want to buy, okay? And you want to buy this book. And as you're buying, there's a third party who's there, and they say that, you know what, it's a very good book, it's a brilliant book. Not that they're being truthful, but because they my friend and they want you to buy. So that's one of the meanings of najash, to also to beautify a product or describe it with beauty that's not in it in order to get the person to buy. Another meaning of najash is comes under the heading of as-sawm ala sawmi akhi, which means that if people are bidding at an auction, okay, and here differentiate between two things. If the auction is still open, okay, auction is still open. So let's say again, we start off with this book. And somebody says they start off at $5, and then somebody says 10, and then you want to bid 15 and 20, and it carries on going up. As long as you both have the intention to buy, then there's no problem. And the bidding is open. The problem occurs when one of two things happen. Either you're at the auction and you have no intention to buy. So let's say I'm the owner of this book and I tell you that we want to try and get the highest price possible. So you just carry on bidding. Every time someone bids, you bid. Every time someone bids, you bid. So here, that's not allowed because he's bidding only with the intention of raising the price higher. Okay? So that's one, or that's another meaning of an-najash. Or as-sawm ala sawmi akhi, which basically means that, or what falls under this also is, if two parties have agreed on a sale, okay, they're not in the negotiation phase. They've agreed. Let's say I want to buy your house, and we've been talking and negotiating for the last few weeks, and we've agreed on a number. Let's say $100,000. And just as we're about to, I'm about to pay you or close the deal, and we've already become familiar and we have an agreement. Notice the difference. We have an agreement in principle. Here, a third party is not allowed to come and offer 110. Why? Because they already agreed. However, if they haven't agreed, they're still in negotiation phase. So, for example, you tell me that, hey, look, I can consider selling my house to you for 100,000. Then somebody else comes and says 110. You open or you allowed to consider that 110. So notice the difference. And they give the example in Arabic to say that when the souls or when the hearts have now agreed to carry out the transaction. And similar to this is when somebody wants to get married. So the Messenger ﷺ says that a person should not give a khitbah. He shouldn't propose over the proposal of his brother. So what does that mean? If there's a woman, okay, looking to get married, if she's still looking for potential husbands, okay, and she saw one person and a second person and a third person and a fourth person, all these people, it's permissible for her to consider all of them, and it's permissible for all these people to approach. Why? Because similar to buying and selling, we are still looking, we are still in negotiation. However, the minute now, let's say she's chosen this person here, person number one, and they've spoken, etc., and they agreed on everything, and now the wedding is about to happen. Okay, they've uh, they about to commit, very close. Here, this number two and number three and number four, anybody else is not allowed to come and say, you know what, consider me, because it's almost as good as done. So that's the meaning. So differentiate between the two. Even when you're buying and selling, when you're still in the negotiation phase or in getting married, when you're searching, you can see as many people as you need to see or want to see. But the minute now you've become fixated on one person and you're about to agree, another party is not allowed to come and interrupt that transaction or that proposal. So that's to do with as-sawm ala sawmi akhi. After that, they mentioned the hadith, the Messenger ﷺ, at one point, he prohibited the Bedouins selling to the people of the city. وَلَا يَبِعْ حَاضِرٌ لِبَادٍ. Now, Bedouins, basically the people in the rural areas. And those people who are hadar, those people we could say in the cities or the modern areas. Why did he prevent them from doing that? So that they don't get ripped off. Okay? So he says that it's not allowed, and in some riwayat he says that if only they had to go to the marketplace and they had to see the whole marketplace as well as the pricing, then they're allowed to sell. Why? Because in those days, let's say the rural people used to grow produce, they used to grow fruit, they used to grow vegetables. Then when they came to the city, number one, they knew in the cities they don't know. So number two, they don't know the pricing of the city. So what people used to do is they would go to the outskirts, so they would try to meet them and tell them that, oh, your product, even though it's worth, for example, 1,000, they'll say, you know, nobody's going to pay you. It's only worth about 500, etc. And bearing in mind, somebody coming from far, they've got their produce, they need to travel, etc. Even if you've got a modern conveyance, modern form of transport, it's a headache going to a place that you don't know. So the Messenger ﷺ said that no, this type of transaction is not allowed until these rural people or Bedouin people, or in our terms, the visitors, are able to get into the marketplace. They're able to see what is the price of the goods they have. Then you can transact. So it's these people don't get ripped off. Okay. After that, number four, or the last one for today, and you must gather them with the previous ones we took in the last lesson. At the time of Adhan of Jumu'ah, here transactions are impermissible. It's not allowed. Allah says, إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع. The minute you hear the call for Jumu'ah, then hasten towards the remembrance of Allah and leave your buying and selling. Now, which Adhan is it? At the time of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was one adhan. So when the Imam gets up onto the mimbar and he greets the people, he says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Then the muadhin starts the adhan straight after that. It's just before the khutbah. From here going forward, buying and selling is haram, talking is haram if in the khutbah, etc. At the time of Uthman radiallahu anhu, when the population had increased, they wanted to have an earlier adhan just as a reminder for the people to get ready for Jumu'ah, or what they call the first adhan. So here your transactions are allowed during the first adhan, because the first adhan is just a reminder. As for the adhan of Jumu'ah, then you're not allowed to transact. Okay? So those are transactions which are prohibited or not allowed. Important to remember, if the transaction had to go through, there's some of them, as we said, the transaction itself is batil. It doesn't stand, okay? And there's others which are fasid. Fasid means there's still an exchange, okay? So if the goods have changed hands, however, they will be sinful for the transaction they carried out. So differentiate between the two. Thereafter, we quickly move on to babul iqala. Iqala is when you in English, we would say to cancel the transaction. So you took before that the minute you want to do a transaction, you have certain things known as khiyar. You have a choice given to you by the Sharia, uh, either to prolong the period you have with the product to make up your mind, or to be able to see the product and then make up your mind, or if there's any defect with the product, to be able to return it, etc. Let's say none of that applies and all your khiyar is finished, but you still want out of the transaction. You don't want it. There's something called iqala. Iqala is where you ask the other party to say, you know what, out of your goodness, out of your goodwill, please could we cancel this transaction? Okay? The seller can ask for it or the buyer can ask for it. Permissible. However, it's not binding. Why? Because there's no reason to cancel the transaction. So let's say if I had to sell my car to you, and after a while, 2 3 days, I realized that, you know what, I need a car. So I come to you and I say the transaction is done, but I say that please please can we have what's called an iqala or aqilni, which means cancel the transaction. Any reason? No reason. You have khiyar, don't have any khiyar to exercise. Here it's your choice. If you want out of the goodness of your heart to cancel the transaction, you can. And if you don't want, you don't have to. However, the one who does it, then the reward is great with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When asking for this, or if this iqala had to go through, here we'll say that it should be according to the initial amount agreed in the transaction. So if, for example, there's nothing wrong with my car, and you ask to say, let's cancel the transaction, and I say, no problem, you paid 1,000 for it, here's your 1,000 back, it's permissible. However, if I ask for more than that, I say, no, give me back 1,200, then that's not allowed. Or less than that, you say, I'm only going to give you 800, then also that's not allowed. So iqala, the same way the transaction happens, similar to how you're doing a return for no reason. You return the and they give you back what you paid for. If the product had to be damaged by you, then you can agree on chopping a little bit. So let's say it was worth 1,000 and then you bumped it, for example, and now you're saying cancel the transaction. Then we can say, okay, we won't give you back the 1,000, we'll give you back 700, but that's due to a reason. The reason and the reason why they mention this to you is after telling you all about khiyar, now they're telling you about iqala. If all that khiyar still fails, or you lost, you can ask the other party to cancel the transaction for you. So that's to do with fiqh, kitabul buyur. Moving on to bulugh al-maram. MashaAllah, we're still at the starting, so I would encourage you to stick with it. If you miss a lesson, try to go over the explanation. It will be short. Told you at the beginning, Bulugh al-Maram is a book again in fiqh. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah gathered different ahadith as which are evidence in the chapters of fiqh. So he started off, after giving you the introduction, he starts off with Kitab al-Tahara. As I mentioned to you many times before, the reason why they start off with Kitab al-Tahara in the books of fiqh is, when you look at the pillars of Islam, the first is the Shahadatain. And all what's to do with the Shahadatain now comes in the books of Aqidah, belief in Allah, belief in the last day, signs of the hour, etc. Okay, after Shahadatain, what is there? Salah. Right. For your Salah to be correct, there's certain prerequisites or conditions you have to fulfill. One of them, or the most important, being your cleanliness, your wudu, your tahara. So that's why they start off with tahara. So he says Kitab al-Taharati, then he says Babul Miyah, the chapter of water. Why? Because you're going to make your wudu, you're going to make your ghusl with water. So you have to know the different types of water that you have or that are present. So he starts off with the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. And firstly, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, scholars differ with regards to his actual name. Most common is, or the majority opinion is, his name was Abdul Rahman ibn Sakhr ad-Dawsi radiallahu anhu. He only accepted Islam very late, so the year of Khaybar, which was roughly the 7th year after Hijri. So he only had 3 years with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even though he only had 3 years with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he memorized the most hadith. Okay, so this is Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. So Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, he mentions his hadith. Now, Ibn Hajar, if you look at his methodology, similar to Bukhari, what they'll do is they mention a hadith for a reason. Okay, so there's a reason. There's a main reason why he mentions his hadith. And he mentions it for you and he extracts the ruling. And sometimes there's other rulings which you can also benefit. Also, they try to go in systematic order. So you go from, for those who've been to university and you know when you're writing your books and your thesis, say you go from that which is general or broad and you become more and more specific. So he gives you the general rulings, the main rulings, and he starts mentioning you certain exceptions to the rule. And you'll see that with Ibn Hajar rahimahullah. First hadith he mentions is the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. Long hadith where some of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum come to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they say, Inna narkabul bahr. We travel by sea or in the sea. And whilst we're traveling, وَنَحْمِلُ مَعَنَا الْقَلِيلَ مِنَ الْمَاءِ. We carry very little water. Okay, so this is the reason for the hadith or the story behind the hadith. They say we carry very little water. With this water, فَإِن تَوَضَّأْنَا بِهِ عَطِشْنَا. If we had to make wudu with it, we'll become thirsty. So then they ask a question. What's the question? أَفَنَتَوَضَّأُ مِن مَاءِ الْبَحْرِ. O Messenger of Allah, should we make wudu with sea water? Okay, so the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says, هو الطهور ماؤه الحل ميتته. The water of the sea is clean. It's, in fact, he uses the word tahur to say it itself is pure and it purifies. Now, one may think, why do you think the Sahaba radiallahu anhum had a doubt when it came to this water? One of the reasons is because seawater is salty, it's sticky, it's undrinkable. So they thought that maybe we're not allowed to make wudu with this water. So that's why they asked. So the Messenger ﷺ says, هو الطهور ماؤه الحل ميتته. The water is tahur, it's pure and it can be used for purification. And he gives them a little bit extra also. He tells them the dead creatures from the sea, if anything that lives in the sea had to die, that's also halal. Okay? Now, the majority opinion in fiqh is if you had to see a dead fish floating, let's say it's not gone bad or rotten, let's say it's just died and it's floating on the top of the water and you picked it up, that's also halal, even if it died by itself. You can take it, you can eat it. The Hanafi madhab says no, only what comes out of the alive. Okay, and when it comes to fish, there's no slaughtering of the fish. Okay, so the majority opinion, even if you find something what's called tafi al al-bahr, floating in the sea or the river, fish that belong to the water or that need to live in the water, it's still halal. Your preference if you want to eat it or not. And based on that, they'll tell you that you're allowed to eat octopus and shrimp and calamari and prawns and whatever you can think about. Where do they get it from? They get it from this hadith. هو الطهور ماؤه, the water is pure. الحل ميتته. Even the things that come out dead from the sea, as long as they were living in the sea, they are also halal. Now, why does Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mention this hadith first? He mentions it to show you that when it comes to the different types of water, first when it comes to sea water, let's get it out of the way. It is pure and it can be used to purify. So when you're going to make wudu, if you're at sea, you can use this water to purify yourself. Full hadith Ibn Hajar mentions this. He says, عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في البحر. Then he says, هو الطهور ماؤه الحل ميتته. Then he gives you the takhrij. Takhrij is who recorded the hadith. So he says, أخرجه الأربعة. The four have recorded it. Who are the four? From the books of Hadith, Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, and Nasai, Ibn Majah. It says, أخرجه الأربعة وابن أبي شيبة. Ibn Abi Shayba is another one who recorded Hadith. It says, وَاللَّفْظُ لَهُ. The wording is that of Ibn Abi Shayba. And then it says, وَصَحَّحَهُ التِّرْمِذِي وَابْنُ خُزَيْمَةَ. It says, At-Tirmidhi and Ibn Khuzaymah said this hadith is authentic, and this hadith is accepted to be authentic. So that's number one, ruling with regards to seawater. Number two, then, he mentions your hadith, and now this is with regards to water that's not seawater. Gives you the hadith, and I would encourage you to memorize these hadith. Those who can memorize them, learn the sharh, and you'll be able to always have evidence with you. You won't need to read through a book, you won't need to read through notes, etc. So the next hadith he tells you is عن أبي سعيد الخدري. So Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, he was a Sahabi radiallahu anhu. I think his name is Sa'd ibn Malik ibn Sinan. Okay, from the Ansar, from the people of Medina. It says عن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الماء طهور لا ينجسه شيء. He says water is pure and it purifies all forms of water in their original form. Water that came as rainwater, water from a river, water from the sea, water from a spring, water from a well, water from a borehole. The default ruling is إن الماء طهور لا ينجسه شيء. This water is pure and nothing makes it impure. Nothing makes it impure. لا ينجسه شيء. Now, it'll take a while to pick this up, but this comes in matters of usulul fiqh. And if you've studied English literature, as well as certain rulings or certain subjects with regards to logic, etc., you find a lot of usulul fiqh is taken from this. So here they say that the first part of the hadith, we all in agreement that innal ma'a tahurun, water is pure. Then when he says la yunajjisuhu shay', which means nothing can make it impure, we'll say this is a general statement. It's am, it's called am. However, it's not taken in its totality. Rather, they call it am makhsus, which means that it's a general ruling. However, in our words, I'll just say that they have certain exceptions to it. So the wording is general. However, it's not in totality. Why? Because he'll tell you he'll give you a reason the next hadith why. So telling you that innal ma'a tahurun la yunajjisuhu shay', water is pure and nothing can purify it, then nothing can make it impure. Then he wants to explain to you this bit. So he gives you the third hadith, and at the third hadith we're going to stop. As for who records this hadith, he says أخرجه الثلاثة وصححه أحمد. He says the three have recorded this hadith. Those are the ثلاثة is I'm sure is Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, and An-Nasai, or At-Tirmidhi and Nasai wa Ibn Majah. Okay, says, and Ahmad has said it's authentic. Thereafter, he wants to explain to you the exceptions with regards to this. So he tells you, third hadith, and this is the last one we'll take today. He says, عن أبي أمامة الباهلي رضي الله عنه. So this is another Sahabi whose name was Abu Umama. Some say his name was Suday ibn Ajlan. Okay, he lived in Sham later on in his life and he passed away there. So he says عن أبي أمامة الباهلي رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الماء لا ينجسه شيء. He says that indeed water, nothing can make it impure. So the first part of hadith number 3 and the first part of hadith number 2 are the same. إن الماء لا ينجسه شيء. Nothing can make it impure. But then he gives you the exception. He says إلا ما غلب على ريحه وطعمه ولونه. Except that which overpowers the water by either its smell or its taste or its color. So now he's given you certain conditions that water must meet. So again, between hadith number 2 and 3, we're in agreement that water in its natural form is pure. But then hadith number 3 tells you there's certain exceptions, or there's certain things that can make this water impure. What are they? Number one, if if the water is overpowered, obviously mixed with a piece of with najasa, that which is impure, and this najasa either changes its color, okay, lawn, okay. Number two, he says wata'am. Ta'am is the taste. Number three, he says ra'iha wa rih, which is the smell. So the minute you've got water, the default ruling is it's clean. However, if it had to mix with najasa, something impure, and now remember, for those who've been with us for the last 2 years, you took all these masail before. This is nothing new for you. What's new is how you're extracting it from the hadith. It tells you that it's all pure, but if najasa had to be mixed with it and the color had to change a little bit. So let's say a child urinated in water, and from this water, you saw that the water turned yellow. So here we'll say that this is no longer pure, this is impure. Or the taste. So for example, let's say, Allah protect, but let's say sewage water gets mixed with pure water and you can smell that the sewage in it will tell you not allowed. It's no longer pure. That's from the taste. And the smell, also the same. So if something najis, let's say a dead animal, had to fall into your bucket of water, let's say a chicken died in your bucket of water, and it started smelling, here we'll say that becomes impure. Okay. Then Ibn Hajar, he gives you one more part of the same hadith. He says, Walil Bayhaqi, so record by Bayhaqi. Bayhaqi says, الماء طاهر إلا إن تغير ريحه أو لونه أو طعمه. Okay. He's basically, for those who go deeper in hadith, you'll find that in the first one they used the word wow. Wow is a conjunction to mean and. So if you had to translate verbatim for this part A of the hadith number 3, it says that water is pure unless some impurity overpowers it. And this impurity overpowering, if it's overpowered by its color and its taste and its smell. So he wants to explain something to you, to say this narration of the hadith uses the word and. So does that mean if some urine had to go into this water and only the color changed, but the taste hasn't changed, the smell hasn't changed, does this mean it's najis? Do we have to have all these 3 conditions in order for it to be najis or not? So here he's telling you that no, even if one of the conditions are fulfilled, then it becomes najis. And he uses the next riwayah to show that in other narrations of the hadith, instead of the word wow, which means and, the word aw is used, which means or. So for example, so here the Messenger is telling you that water is clean unless its taste is changed, or its smell is changed, or its color is changed. And when giving you the takhrij of this hadith, the way this hadith is recorded, he tells you that the first part of it is أخرجه ابن ماجه وضعفه أبو حاتم. He says this hadith, it's weak. Okay? It's a weak hadith. And as I told you, there's 2 parts to it. Hadith number 2 told you that water is clean. Okay? Hadith number 3, the first part of it told you water is clean. So hadith number 2 we know is correct. Hadith number 3 will say the first part of it we all in agreement that is correct because these 2 are the same. So that's how they strengthen hadith. Okay? It's one of the ways to strengthen. As for the second part of it, where it says the exception, unless the color changes or the taste changes or the smell changes, here they'll tell you even though the hadith is weak, okay, it's supported by ijma'. Ijma' means consensus of the scholars. So all the scholars agree that any amount of water, which is a lot or a little, if najasa, impurity, had to be mixed in it and it had to change one of its properties, they all in agreement that it becomes najis. So here we'll say we use this hadith, even though it's weak, but the scholars have agreed on it. And this also shows you that you sometimes you can benefit from a weak hadith. The scholars do benefit from a weak hadith, and at times you may have rulings which may not be mentioned specifically in the hadith, however they can be agreed upon by everybody. So again, to quickly recap what we took, first he told you about seawater, and he says seawater is pure as well as the dead from the sea is pure. And one of the benefits from this hadith I mentioned in the last lesson, but I'll recap for those who weren't there, the ulama start to extract benefits. So they look at the wording of the hadith and you extract benefits. And the more you listen to somebody who can extract these benefits, especially if you know Arabic or you read, for example, Ibn Hajar in his explanation of Bukhari, it helps your thinking, it helps your mind, it makes you become sharper. So one of the examples they tell you, the Sahaba who came to ask about the water, they only asked about the sea water. And the Messenger ﷺ gave them an answer which had or included more than they asked for. So he told them about the water, and he also told them about the dead animals from the sea, like dead fish, etc. Why? Because they mentioned if a person asks a mufti a question or they ask you a question, and you know that they need more of an answer because they'll be able to use it or they may need this knowledge. Bearing in mind those days when they used to go to sea, they used to probably ride for weeks and months, so they need this ruling. So he gave it to them also. So giving somebody a more encompassing answer compared to the question they asked. So that was hadith number 1. Hadith 2, I told you that water is clean, nothing makes it impure. And hadith number 3 went to tell you about this uh, exception to the rule with regards to impurity. And they said if something had to change with its color, with its taste, or its smell, and then he gave you the riwayah of Bayhaqi, where he wants to explain to you the meaning of wow in this hadith, and it says means aw. Inshallah, we'll stop there. Hope you guys understood. It is a little bit deeper than what you're used to learning. However, it's important you start and